The government starts collecting views of Wang Fuk Court residents about long-term rehousing. Contractors are set to receive new, safer scaffolding nets next week from the Construction Industry Council's bulk order. And rallies spread across the U.S. to protest forceful actions by federal immigration agents. Good evening, you're watching Cable News. I'm Quentin Yan. The government has launched a survey to collect the views of residents displaced by the deadly Taipo fire on long-term rehousing options. The proposals include redevelopment of the original Wang Fuk Court site as subsidized housing, which could take up to 10 years. Jamie Liu shares more.
In a 7-page questionnaire, Wang Fuk Court residents are asked 5 questions about rehousing principles and options. It first asks whether flat owners are willing to let the government buy back property rights from them and give them cash, and they can choose to buy subsidized flats or homes on the private market. Citing the Hong Kong Institute of Surveyors, the survey says the flats are estimated to sell for about $8,000 per square foot if the owners have already paid the land premium, and closer to $6,000 if they have not. For those who wish to rehouse in Taipo, one of the options is to redevelop the fire-ravaged Wang Fuk Court as subsidized housing. However, it requires a wait of up to 10 years, the longest among all, as the process would include demolition and reconstruction. For other options in the same district, residents can choose the future subsidized housing estate on Chung Nga Road, which could provide 900 units as early as 2029. Another site also in Taipo is Wang Fuk Park, but it requires replanning, and the earliest move-in would be in 2033. For those seeking a quicker resettlement, they are offered the chance to buy new subsidized flats in other locations such as Kai Tak, Tung Chung and Kowloon Bay, which could allow them to move in as soon as September this year. Finally, the government proposes a flat-for-flat arrangement that does not involve buying and selling of properties, in which owners directly swap for a new subsidized flat of similar value without having to pay the price difference. The government stressed the survey aims to gauge initial views of residents, and their responses do not mean they formally accept any of the options. Authorities aim to gather the responses by mid to late January for analysis. Jamie Liu, Cable News.
Following the scaffolding net scandal over substandard fire retardant, the Construction Industry Council's bulk order of 50,000 compliant scaffolding nets is arriving. While the new safer nets are currently more expensive, the industry believes there is room for the costs to go down. Jeremy Zhu has more.
The crisis began after the disastrous fire at Taipo's Wang Fuk Court revealed allegedly faked safety reports for netting used in renovation projects. This prompted the government to order the removal of scaffolding nets from over 400 buildings across the city. To cope with the new requirements in the Buildings Department's Code of Practice, the Construction Industry Council has procured tens of thousands of newly certified nets during the transition period. The initial consignment of 12,000 arrived and passed quality checks on Thursday. They are scheduled for distribution next week, with the entire shipment expected to arrive before the Lunar New Year. Taking to the airwaves, Lawrence Ng, president of the Hong Kong Construction Subcontractors Association, said the council conducted rigorous supplier checks. The new nets are manufactured using a heat fusion process that embeds flame-retardant material, making them more durable than previous versions, where a coating could wear off. Furthermore, each net will be fitted with an electronic tag to prevent fraudulent activities. Ng added the cost of each net has raised by at least $60 due to enhanced safety features, dual testing, and anti-fraud technology. For a project like Wang Fuk Court, this translates to a cost increase of roughly 0.1%. However, as a large portion of the initial cost involves testing, prices have room to decrease after further trialing and calculation. He hopes the council will help to source more suppliers in the future, providing the industry with a register of reliable sources. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News.
Legal reformers have called for a new bespoke law that will see hackers who interfere with critical infrastructure like railways, airports, or hospitals face life imprisonment, marking a major step to modernize the city's cybercrime legislation. The Law Reform Commission today released its final report, recommending a single, comprehensive law against 5 core cyber-dependent crimes, namely the illegal access to programs or data, illegal interception of computer data, illegal interference with computer data, illegal interference with a computer system, and the provision or possession of tools like hacking software for committing such crimes. The recommendations include specific defenses to balance security with other interests. For instance, unauthorized access might be permitted for cybersecurity professionals, genuine academic research, or to protect vulnerable persons like children under 16. Derek Chen, who chairs the Commission's Cybercrime Subcommittee, noted that anyone claiming a public interest defense would face a high burden of proof. On tackling the involvement of artificial intelligence in cybercrimes, Chen said the proposed legislation's scope would be limited.
Although artificial intelligence and the way it can be used to commit crimes is obviously an issue, the way we have structured the 5 suggested offenses is such that if artificial intelligence is used to commit that sort of crime, then that would also be a crime. But we haven't extended the analysis to, well, if that's the case, how do we regulate those who write AIs or those who run the AI models? That would need a separate and a wholesale consideration.
For most of the 5 offenses, the maximum penalty would be 14 years imprisonment. However, aggravated interference crimes that endanger life, such as tampering with railway signaling, could draw life imprisonment. The law would also have extraterritorial reach, allowing Hong Kong courts to try cases with a clear connection to the city. The government has welcomed the report and said it will study the recommendations carefully. In the United States, outrage over the violent immigration enforcement by the Trump administration, which has left 1 woman dead and 2 others injured in 2 separate cases, has ignited protests from coast to coast, deepening a rift between federal authorities and local leaders. In the latest flare-up of tensions, hundreds of protesters gathered outside a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement building in Oregon's Portland, after authorities said federal immigration officers shot and wounded 2 people in a vehicle during a traffic stop Thursday afternoon. Federal authorities stated the 2 wounded were part of a vicious Venezuela gang, and the driver tried to run over agents, forcing one to fire in self-defense. Portland Mayor Keith Wilson condemned the shooting and asked ICE to halt all operations in the city. The shooting in Portland came as people across the country were already staging protests over the Wednesday killing in Minneapolis, Minnesota. About 1,000 demonstrators confronted armed, masked federal officers outside an immigration court in the city. At least 1 protester was detained as federal officers tackled the crowd with violence. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia, protesters took to the streets at night, joining a coordinated national outcry. No! The turmoil stems from the fatal shooting of a 37-year-old mother by an ICE officer. Likewise, the Department of Homeland Security said the agent acted in self-defense after the mother weaponized her vehicle and attempted to run over officers. Local officials vehemently rejected the account, but were denied involvement in the investigation. As DHS Chief Christine Noem asserts, the state has no jurisdiction. Vice President J.D. Vance also defended the unidentified agent, calling the woman's death a tragedy of her own making. Minnesota Governor Tim Walz said he's pessimistic about the fair outcome, arguing that people in positions of power have already passed judgment. Thousands of anti-government protesters have continued to take to the streets across Iran in what is said to be the largest show of force by opponents of the clerical regime in years. At least 45 demonstrators have been reportedly killed since the unrest began 2 weeks ago, including 8 minors. Jeremy Zhu has the story.
The wave of protests shows no sign of subsiding. In the capital Tehran on Thursday night, large crowds filled the streets. A government building was set alight and cheers broke out as protester numbers continue to swell. Demonstrators have called for the overthrow of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and the return of Reza Pahlavi, the exiled son of the late former Shah, who has earlier urged supporters to demonstrate. Several human rights organizations say the protests have now spread to 31 provinces and more than 100 towns across the country. The trigger lies in a collapsing economy, soaring inflation, and a currency crisis. Every day I see customers who can no longer afford certain items. They only buy main staples, they can't afford other things, said one shopkeeper in Tehran. A week ago, I bought a tray of eggs for 2.2 million rials. Today, it costs 3.5 million. Prices of cooking oil, rice, everything has risen, another resident added. Following large-scale protests, Iran is reportedly under a near-total internet blackout. Network monitors believe the government is trying to curb protest coordination and may be preparing a violent crackdown. In an interview, U.S. President Donald Trump again warned Tehran that if protesters are killed, the United States will respond strongly. Jeremy Zhu, Cable News.
The United States may stay involved in Venezuela for years and keep taking its oil for sale, the country's President Donald Trump said, while brushing off chances for the South American country holding election at the moment. Jimmy Liu reports.
Venezuela's future governance remains in doubt as Trump has yet to give a precise time frame of how long the U.S. would be involved. In an interview with the New York Times, when asked whether it would be months, a year, or longer, Trump replied, "I would say much longer." Regarding his plan to rebuild oil infrastructure in Venezuela, Trump envisioned the project to be very profitable, giving the money to the cash-strapped nation it desperately needs. He claimed American oil companies would invest at least $100 billion and the executives would meet him at the White House soon. Trump said Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez's government was getting along very well with his team, but dismissed her administration's ability to hold an election right now. He also planned a meeting next week with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, whom he left sidelined after Nicolas Maduro's ouster. Meanwhile, in Venezuela, relatives waited outside a prison after hearing news that a number of imprisoned citizens and foreigners would be released. Reuters reported that Venezuelan Spanish rights activist Roxio San Miguel was among some political prisoners freed. Venezuela's top lawmakers said the release was intended to seek peace. In Caracas, acting President Rodriguez met with China's ambassador to Venezuela, Lan Hu, and thanked Beijing for strongly condemning the serious violation of international law following the U.S. capture of Maduro. Jamie Liu, Cable News.
Now let's take a look at the stock market. The Hang Seng Index closed 82 points higher. Top active stocks of the day. Alibaba was up $3.90. Tencent was down $5. Xiaomi was down 20 cents. And shares of newly listed Minimax WP closed at $345, up 109% from the offer price. Onto the weather now. Fine and very dry, rather cool tomorrow morning. The minimum temperature will be about 14 degrees in the urban areas and significantly lower over parts of the new territories. The maximum temperature will be around 21 degrees during the day. And that's our news tonight. I'm Quentin Yang. Thank you for watching. Good night.